Millions of people go missing every year. It's inevitable. It will happen. But what happens when people go missing and they're found? But when they're found, they're unidentified. Sadly, a lot of those victims end up in unmarked graves or sitting in morgues and never receive their identity back. And it's a lot like this next story. However, this story is a lot deeper than just being a Jane Doe, because this was ruled self-inflicted. But evidence suggests otherwise. This is the story of Brianna Sharp. March 24th, 1995. The world would make way for Brianna Sharp. Brianna would be born in Texarkana, Texas, and born to a mother who went by the name of Sabrina Sharp. At the time of her birth, her mother was only 17 years old, and she was still in high school. At the time of Brianna's birth, she would be dating a fellow classmate who went by the name of Craig Monroe. When Brianna was born, it was believed that Craig was her actual father. However, situations would arise and the parents would ask for a DNA test. The DNA test would come into play because Craig Monroe wasn't just a normal student. Even in his high school years, he was already being scouted for Major League Baseball, and rumors began to arise that Sabrina pinned the baby on him because it would be more beneficial. Now, these rumors were circulate because while Sabrina was in high school, she had an on and off again boyfriend, a guy who went by the name of Leonard Cobb. So Sabrina's boyfriend Craig takes the test, and come to find out, he's not the father of Brianna. And with this newfound information, they know for certain that Leonard Cobb is the actual father of Brianna. The downside to this story is that this situation would take 2 years, and the year would now be 1997, and Brianna would be 2 years old. And since the birth of Brianna, Sabrina has had 2 more children, and life is stressful at this point. Sabrina Sharp would then decide to take Brianna and her other 2 children and move to Detroit, Michigan with her mother. A couple years would pass since she's moved to Detroit, and Brianna is now 5 years old, and nothing has changed. Life is still stressful, and Sabrina's still having a hard time. So Sabrina and Leonard would come to terms, and they would decide that it would be better if Brianna stayed with her father. So that's what she does. Brianna Sharp goes to Texas to live with her father. But when she gets to his home, the red flags immediately begin to pop out. Brianna is 5, but at this time, she's nonverbal. She can't even talk yet, and she wasn't special needs. She was just underdeveloped. So Leonard takes actions. He immediately places her in school, and they get her on the right track. Although Brianna was living with her father, every summer Brianna would return home to Detroit, Michigan to spend summertime with her mother. And after spending the first summer with her mother and returning home to her father, Leonard would notice some immediate changes. Upon starting her first grade year in school, her behavior would be bad. She would be caught lying, stealing, and acting out. And for the next few years to come, nothing changes. It was the same story. Brianna would go to her mother's during summer break, and she would come back a little worse every time. The year's now 2008, and Brianna Sharp is now 13 years old. Her behavior is still the same. In fact, it's gotten worse. And at this point, Leonard feels like he's done all he could. In between her behavior and the authorities getting CPS involved, he felt like he was out of all options. So he would decide to send her back to Detroit to live with her mother indefinitely. So Leonard buys his 13-year-old daughter a plane ticket. He puts her on the plane. Brianna would look back one last time before getting on the plane and tell her father goodbye. But little did Leonard know that that would be the last time he ever sees his daughter. After sending his daughter off to live with the mother, Leonard would make several attempts to get in contact with Sabrina. However, she wasn't answering the phone, and this would continue on for a full year. And in 2009, when Leonard got fed up not being able to talk to his daughter, he would decide to get the authorities involved. He would call the police and he would ask them to perform a wellness check on his daughter. So they go to the location that's provided in their database. But when they get there, Sabrina has moved and the house is vacant. So the police would tell Leonard that since she wasn't at that address, there was nothing they could do. So Leonard hangs up the phone, but he doesn't give up. He decides to contact the Center of Missing and Exploited Children, and after explaining his situation to them, they would contact the authorities and apply pressure, and then magically, they go to work, and they're able to find Sabrina. They would track Sabrina down at her local job, and when they go to talk to her, Sabrina is very nonchalant about the situation. They ask about Brianna's whereabouts, but her answer is shocking. She would state that Brianna ran away over a year ago and that she hadn't seen her since 2008 on July 31st. Sabrina Sharp has now told the authorities that she hasn't seen her daughter for a full year. A full year. And the last time that she saw her was in summertime of 2008, which is correct. But it's important that you understand the dynamic of the household at that time. It was Brianna. She lived in the home with her mother, her brothers and sisters, and her mother had a boyfriend. Around July 31st of 2008, Sabrina Sharp was invited to a wedding of a relative. So she attends this wedding and she takes the children with her. But there's one catch to this story. Brianna isn't allowed to go. Her mother forces her to stay home, and she's left behind with the boyfriend. But get this, the boyfriend was under strict orders not to let 13-year-old Brianna inside of the home while her mother was away. Just hearing that situation is sad, but her brothers and sisters would testify that Brianna had it the hardest. She was treated the worst, and they never understood why. A lot of people believe it's because around the age of 13, Brianna began to go through some changes. She began to wear boys' clothes and stopped going by the name of Brianna, but preferred to be called Brianna. And people believe that this drove a wedge between her and her mother. In fact, people say that her mother absolutely despised this. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I can say that something definitely had to be going on because her daughter is now missing for a full year and she acts like she doesn't care. Now, mind you, the year is now 2009. It's been over a year since Sabrina has heard from her daughter and she hasn't reported her missing. But now that she's confronted by the authorities, she would officially report her missing on October 21st of 2009. The media would then pick up this story and air her photo and let everyone know to be on the lookout for her. But even with her photo being aired across national headlines, nothing turns up. The whereabouts of Brianna Sharp is a complete mystery. Though Leonard Cobb is actively searching for his daughter, Sabrina wasn't. It was as if she never existed. Time continues to elapse, and Brianna still hasn't appeared. The year is now 2010. While working on the case of Brianna Sharp, the police would run across another case, a case of an unidentified body, one that was found around the same time that Brianna disappeared. And when they open up the case file and review the details, they slowly begin to realize that it's a strong possibility that this might be Brianna. August 6th, 2008. It's a hot summer day in the city of Detroit, Michigan. It would be this day that 51-year-old Jerry Parker would be performing maintenance at a local apartment. While working on a washer and dryer in a unit, he would discover that it was out of commission. So the next step is to grab one out of a vacant unit. Upon walking up to the apartment, he would notice that one of the windows were shattered. But at first glance, it wasn't alarming. A broken window in a vacant unit isn't too off, so he shrugs it off and he enters the apartment. But upon entering the apartment, he would immediately discover the body of a young female. The female would be discovered laying in the stairway portion of the home, and once he discovers this, he contacts the authorities, and they arrive on the scene. Upon arriving on the scene, they would discover what they thought to be a young female between the ages of 15 and 17. They would immediately make notation that the victim had trauma to the face. She would be wearing a white sports bra, blue Dickies, boys boxers, dark blue jeans, and white gym shoes. The authorities have now reached the scene and discovered the body of a young female. They would process the scene and analyze it further, but they would wait on pending autopsy results for the final outcome, although they would make notation that they believe this was a self-inflicted situation. After the crime scene is processed, the body is transported to the medical examiner's office, but once there, the medical examiner would decline to do an autopsy, but instead do a visual examination, which is extremely odd for a situation like this, especially when the victim is young. At least that's what the police thought, because they thought this was a victim between the ages of 15 and 17. But the medical examiner has the final say so, and they would make notation that this was a victim between the ages of 19 and 21. They would also make a side note that the victim looked to be pregnant. But despite those circumstances, there was no autopsy. The body would be failed to be identified, and then it would be shipped to an unmarked grave. She would share this grave alongside 3 other victims. 3 other people who haven't received their identity. And for years to come, it would be this Jane Doe alongside 3 other people, laying in an unmarked grave. No one ever visited, no one ever left flowers, just forgotten souls hoping for a miracle. Once the authorities received this lead, they would decide to investigate even further. When Leonard had initially reported Brianna missing to the Center of Missing and Exploited Children, he had turned in a couple of baby teeth just in case they ever needed it. And now would be the time they actually did. So they send those teeth off for DNA testing, and it would take a lot of time for the test to come back. But on June 21st of 2012, the body found in the vacant apartment would officially be identified as Brianna Sharp. And after years of sitting in an unmarked grave, she would finally have her name back. In the end, it would take a total of 4 years before Brianna would ever receive her identity back. And it's a sad situation. Now, when it comes to the police ruling this self-inflicted, I have to be honest, that's a story that I'm not buying. There was a lot of odd circumstances going on around the time that she was actually found. Remember that I made mention that Brianna Sharp's mother had went off to a wedding with her siblings and left her home. And the only person that was in the home was the boyfriend. Well, her sister would say that on the day that Brianna Sharp was actually identified, the boyfriend got up and moved out of the house. I'm not pointing the finger. I'm merely introducing evidence. And if you taper that in with the fact that she was possibly pregnant, that gives way to motive. But we'll never know because an autopsy wasn't performed. This story is all around sad. But one good thing did come from this. After Brianna Sharp was officially identified, the police would raid the home of Sabrina Sharp, and they would remove the other children. And I believe in the end that it's the best thing for this situation, because if she allowed her 13-year-old daughter to go missing and never even cared, she doesn't need the other ones. Rest in peace, Brianna Sharp. Thank you for being a light for others.
I was lost in the woods, under dust, and the fairies found me. And they led the way, they cleared the way to my home.